All right, good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone back. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces that were here with us a couple weeks ago. For those of you joining for the first time tonight, my name is Malini Sims, and I am a principal planner with the town of Oro Valley. I will also be facilitating tonight's meeting. Joining me this evening is Renee Overa, senior planner with the town. We have Commander Mike Gracie and Sergeant Marshall Morris from OVPD, as well as Assistant Chief Eric Perry and Deputy Fire Marshal Jen Akins from Golden Ranch Fire District, as well as Judge Hazel. So we're all on this meeting tonight to support you all in your discussion. But before we get started, I do want to make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to introduce themselves. So if you were unable to attend the meeting on the 13th, or you were unable to introduce yourself during that meeting, if you'd please raise your virtual hand now, and we'll have you introduce yourself to the group. Great, so Mike Weisberger.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike. I've lived in Oro Valley for about 4 years, and I'm currently on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and that's one of my pet projects. And that's why I'm on this call, is because I'm interested in Parks and Rec and then anything that has to do with that. I love Oro Valley. It's a great place, and just hoping to give a little back to the community.
Great, thank you, Mike. Hal.
Hi, so I'm Hal. I'm been a resident for about 7 years now. I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 2 terms, 4 years. I'm a retired professional planner, so I get into this stuff a little bit. And I also am involved in the development working group, I guess is what you're calling it. But this is interesting. I did listen to the recording of the discussion on the 13th. It was very informative, and have a few thoughts to add based on what I heard. So thanks.
Great, thank you, Hal. All right, anyone else joining this meeting for the first time tonight that wasn't here on the 13th, please raise your hand. All right, Shannon, if you want to introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, I'm Shannon Jensen. Sorry I missed last week. I was able to watch most of the recording and then review all the notes. It looks like you guys did some good work.
Great, thank you, Shannon. All right, we can get started. I'm going to share some slides, so just one moment. All right. So the last time we met, you guys all participated in a great discussion that really gave us a lot of additional guidance to help craft the draft goals, policies, and actions. So our focus tonight is really to walk through those drafts with you and make sure that they reflect not only what was heard from residents over the last year, but also what you discussed at your last meeting. I do want to emphasize the word draft, though, because these really are our first attempts to capture everything. The drafts will continue to be refined and will be sent back out to everyone for wordsmithing and further review. So again, tonight our focus is really to make sure that they reflect what was heard and that nothing is missing. And again, for those of you just joining for the first time tonight, there's definitely an opportunity to still add more information as well. With that said, our aim for this meeting is to achieve consensus on the first drafts. So for those of you who attended the kickoff event, you helped define the word consensus. Some of your responses are shown on the screen. So for instance, it's you may not like everything, but can accept it as a whole, thinking of the benefit for the entire community and making sure that these are heading down the right paths. So please keep that in mind as we go through the goals, policies, and actions tonight. I also just want to give a quick overview of what goals, policies, and actions are. So goals are really the bigger picture, and they aim to answer the question, what are we striving for? Or what is our desired results? The policies are kind of that bridge between a goal and an action. So that's kind of the direction that that gives us to achieve the goals. And then actions are the specific steps that the town can take to fulfill the policies. And Hal, I see your hand raised. Did you have a question or comment?
Well, just to point out that you don't have the slideshow fully engaged here.
So that is correct. We will be using this as our workspace tonight. So I can definitely make it a little bit bigger though, if that helps. Yep. Thank you. Okay. And lastly, before we just start our discussion, I do want to remind folks of the ground rules that everyone has accepted. We do need everyone's help to make sure that this meeting's efficient and productive. We do have a lot to go through tonight. Essentially, we're going through the same topics we went through a couple weeks ago. So just keep that in mind as we're moving forward. And again, to help everybody try to make the discussion efficient, I'll be keeping time, but just keep that in mind. All right, so for tonight's discussion, we will not be using the Zoom whiteboard. We'll be using PowerPoint as our workspace this evening, but we will still be scribing everyone's comments. We do prefer to hear everyone's voice and see your faces, but please feel free to use the chat to add your comments or questions as well. Our number one goal is we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to let their voice heard, regardless of how you do that tonight. As shown on the screen, we do have 6 areas to get through tonight. One is things to maintain, funding and staffing. Both of those were related to making sure that our safety stays the number one priority. Then we'll go into maintaining a low crime rate. So for those of you who were here last time, that was our ecosystem, looking at courts, schools, businesses, residents, HOAs, and OVPD, how we can all work together to maintain a low crime rate. We'll then move into traffic safety. There was a lot of conversation about enforcement, different routes, as well as school zones. And that's also where pedestrian and cyclist safety came up a bit. And then we'll move on to emergency preparedness. That's being prepared from flooding or fires. There's a lot of great conversation about what's concerning around those, but also opportunities for partnerships as well as education and outreach. And then we'll wrap up tonight with the legal requirements. So the state does have specific requirements that are required in a 10-year plan. So we also, throughout this process as staff, want to make sure that the goals, policies, and actions are also meeting our legal obligations. Okay. So with that, we can get into our discussion. And I know you can't read these, so I will ask Ms. Overa. She will add a link in the chat to the whiteboard. So if you do want to take a deeper dive on the whiteboard, you can definitely click on the link and then you'll be able to open it on your own device. But quickly, just to summarize our first 2 topics, again, were things to maintain, funding, and training. Okay, and just to summarize under those, with regards to things to maintain, there was discussion about making sure quick response times to calls were maintained, high visibility of our police force, having emergency responders who are approachable, well-trained, being transparent and dedicated was also brought up, as well as using technology to support public safety. Then similarly and how to support that under funding and staffing was increasing visibility of police, especially along roadways, making sure OV has enough officers and budget accordingly, and training to deal with complex issues. I do want to mention that other working groups also identified safety as an essential service. So looking at the chart on your screen, what's in the colorful boxes, that's what, again, we heard from you all last meeting. But to the left of that, under community guidance, that's what we heard through the statistically projectable survey. So that is, just to remind folks, that means that when you see a number like 36%, that really represents about 15,000 residents, because it is projectable to all Oro Valley adults. Now, what you see as you head right of the colorful boxes is first the working actions. Again, these are the more detailed steps. And then the policy is that bridge between the action and goal, which is shown all the way on the left. The actions, policies, and goals are ultimately what would end up in the draft 10-year or in the 10-year plan, not the guidance per se. So with that, our aim tonight, looking at just these ones, is to answer, do the draft actions, policies, and goals reflect the community and group's guidance? And to answer that, we can talk about, is there anything missing or anything that needs to be clarified or further refined? So I'll give everyone a moment to read through it, and then if you have a comment, please raise your, or question, please raise your hand. Hal, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure. Well, I reviewed these before tonight's meeting, and I don't see anything wrong or missing based on the discussion that occurred on the 13th. But one thing that didn't come up on the 13th that I think you might want to reflect in these is the relationship between the level of police protection or fire protection and so on to insurance rates, homeowners insurance, I suppose auto insurance as well. I think that it's something that we should strive for. There's an old commercial from years ago regarding air filters, oil filters for car maintenance. And, the saying was, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And if we don't have a high level of protection here, which we do, I think now, then those rates are going to go up. I still think that may be a problem in the community over the long term. I follow posts on Nextdoor, and I've seen some recently where people are saying they've lost their homeowners insurance. The company is moving out because of fire issues, or their rates are going up. I think it's certainly something that we should strive to address if rates are increasing, and do what we can to reduce that. There's going to be a discussion next week on housing, and certainly homeowners insurance rates are a big part of housing costs. So the more we can limit increases, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure, thanks, Hal. May I ask a follow-up question? So just to help for some guidance, to clarify, how do you foresee the town being able to assist with insurance rates? Are you saying just by making sure there's enough protection, or?
Yeah, I think generally just making sure we have a high level of protection, both police and fire. But if insurance companies are leaving the community because they perceive that it's an area subject to fires, for example, wildfires, maybe there should be an effort to reach out, and maybe that's happening. I don't know. But make sure that insurance companies are aware that we do have a high level of protection in this community.
Thank you, Hal, for clarifying. I see, I'm going to go to Rosa, and then Jen, I think you may want to have some more information you can share there. But Rosa, did you have thoughts on?
Yeah, so the bullet, transparency through technology and best practices, that seemed a little wonky. I mean, I think transparency through best practices, and then technology to enhance safety, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like using technology like cameras and things of that nature to enhance the safety of Oro Valley. So maybe
Thank you.
split those two up.
Yep. Great. Thank you. Using technology. So, all right. And then Jen, I think you may have had a.
Thanks, Malini. I just wanted to add a comment relating to Hal's suggestions
Mhm.
and just make sure residents know that the forms and the rating procedures that we use as the fire district are different rating forms and scales than the insurance companies use. And there are quite often situations where our rating scales that are a national standard do not match theirs and will show a low hazard where the insurance company is showing a high hazard. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind and see what we can do to potentially see if there's anything that we can do to change that. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but just keep in mind that sometimes the insurance company's ratings do not match what our ratings are.
Great. Thank you for the additional information. I'm not seeing other hands raised, but any other comments or questions on this one? Any areas where we can clarify further? Okay, so before we move on to the next page, does everyone agree that this as a first draft is headed in the right direction? We'll definitely look into adding in some more information as Hal talked about, but also splitting up A1 a little bit better. But overall, are we good to go to the next page? You just, okay, seeing all head nods. All right. All right, so again, I know these aren't super readable, so please use the link that Renee put in the chat if you want to open up the document on your own device. But the next set of goals, policies, and actions are related to that ecosystem of safety. So looking at courts, school safety, what can be done with the courts, but also partnering with schools, businesses, HOAs, through programs. And then there was also just other comments about different areas to help reduce crime. So with that, I'm gonna, it is split up into 2 pages. So let me just quickly show you both pages. So this one, we'll talk about court, school safety, business outreach and partnerships, and then we'll go on to community outreach and programs and other. So on this page, I'll give you a moment. And again, we're trying to answer the question is, do these accurately reflect what the community said on the very left-hand side, what guidance you gave us in the orange boxes, and then, or anything you have to add this evening. And I'll give everyone a moment to read through. You'll also notice on this page, there's a duplicate A1. So that is because we felt that action not only addressed what we talked about previously, but also addressed some of the comments provided under business outreach and partnerships. Again, if we make a change, as Rosa pointed out, for transparency, we'll make that same change here as well. If you have a question or comment, you can raise your hand, or again, if you feel more comfortable, please put it in the chat. We definitely want to make sure everyone who wants to speak tonight has an opportunity. Mike. Oh, and you're muted, Mike. Oh, Mike, I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that. So I don't know if it goes here or where exactly it goes, maybe here. But lately we've gotten some very favorable press and PR about safety in town. And I think we should be leveraging that to the extent possible, whether it means, billboards or signs on the roads or, somewhere in the town, and maybe getting businesses involved in doing that. Something that kind of reinforces the notion that crime doesn't pay here in Oro Valley, and you know, again, I don't know exactly where that would go, but I'm thinking here is kind of a community outreach, is kind of a reverse outreach, is kind of, reaching out to our own community and making sure that people understand that we are getting, that this is something we can leverage to our benefit.
That's a great point. I will, so I am adding that, and we'll look to add that somewhere in the schools policies. Are there other, oh, Joanne?
Okay, sorry. I had a question that, and I think I lost it because I was I was just about to leave the chat instead of typing the mute. I'll come back if I
Okay.
if I remember.
Yep, please do. And even if we move on to another page, please let us know.
Okay.
I did see in the chat that Assistant Chief Perry did put more information about homeowners insurance in the chat. So, and then Joanne, did you?
Okay, so I just remembered. How does Oro Valley, the police department, as far as pay hourly pay or however they get paid, how is that compared to like TPD or Marana or anything like that? Do we know that?
I'll ask Commander Gracie. Do you have more information?
Yeah, unfortunately, probably in the past 5 to 8 years, our region has started to experience things that exist elsewhere. Most prominently up in the Phoenix Valley area. They one, can afford, but two, also get into sort of a pay war. And it became very popular up there for officers to leave one agency with various amounts of tenure to go to a neighboring one for far more money. And then that just became cyclical. You know, the one they left, they assessed, raised theirs, and it just went around. So it's not uncommon to hear of officers who've been at 4 or 5 different agencies, and 2 or 3 of them are the same ones. They just come back when the money's better. We knew that was coming. Obviously, it's a tricky thing that we have to consider. We don't just ask for the sky is the limit, but we are very diligent about bringing regional comparisons to bear when it comes to meeting the chief's goals for fair and equitable yet competitive compensation. So a lot of people have their hand in that bucket, right? Obviously, our demographics are different here. We're not the Phoenix Valley; that's far different. But there's employment law. There's HR has a say in a lot of things. Ultimately, the town council does or can. We do have bargaining units that work every couple of years on our MOU to keep these things competitive. We're doing well. We have our moments where we're not, and that's definitely about every 1 to 2 years we have to reassess and take into account what our neighboring jurisdictions are doing, and those come and go. So we are currently behind to a degree. There's been some pretty good raises down at the city, and our dedication is to keep abreast of those things, so that we're constantly analyzing where we lie in that field, because it affects our recruitment, and we do not want it to become a thing that could affect our retention. Those are 2 very different things, although they're very strongly related. The number one thing we want to avoid most is getting outpaced without having been paying attention to these changes in regional wages and having people leave.
Right.
I can't say we've been untouched by it. A couple of years back, there was a moderate exodus for DPS, because as a state-funded agency, they were offering ridiculous salaries and incentives to lateral officers, and I think we lost 3, maybe 4. I know Sergeant Morris could help me out with that. It's sort of a moot point. That's our biggest comparison. We don't have a lot of loss. When we see loss, it's usually to leave the field in general. They leave law enforcement altogether. But that doesn't mean we can just rest on our laurels and say it's not a problem, because if we're not paying attention to it and trying to be proactive in it, that's when we'll get caught behind.
Thank you. Joanne, did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So does everybody think with that information, does A1 still help in terms of making sure we have a high level of staffing and funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's how close, I'm sorry to ask another question. How close are we to, like, I know we're not 100% filled. How close are we to that?
Commander Gracie, do you know how close we are to being fully staffed?
By full, you mean the staffing of our sworn
Correct.
officers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So technically, we are fully staffed
Okay.
right now, but that's sort of a paper figure. That doesn't mean we have those officers on the street, because we tend to do a pretty good mix for our internal culture of lateral officers that come to us from somewhere else, that have already gotten their certification through the state as a peace officer. So that's training and academy that we don't have to sponsor. But we balance that with new hires, because it is important to get younger people, new people to the profession, not necessarily bring over everyone else's culture. So we try to balance between the two. We're currently slotted for 107 sworn officer positions. On paper, we have them. I believe I was looking today, and that 6 of those are in academies. So we have them, they're employees, but they're out there getting trained, and it's 22, 24 weeks of an academy. We get them back, and then there's 14 plus weeks of in the field training. So even though we have them on paper, it's a better part of a year before they're out on the road driving the fancy Shamus around taking calls.
Yeah.
So we always account for that. That's usually how we balance our new hires with our laterals to get a good mix, and the timing is important. There's not always an academy going because they're so long. So sometimes we'll backfill with some laterals who are ready to go. They get an abbreviated training session and they're serviceable much more quickly. So I've been here 17 years. I guess this is the first time I could say we're fully staffed, but because it's in flux, I've learned since being in command that fully staffed is this ceiling, and we always kind of bump it, right? Because as soon as we get these guys on the road, someone's going to retire. You know, we have a very tenured officer retiring tomorrow, you know.
Okay.
So where we thought we were staffed on Monday, not tomorrow.
Yeah,
And it can change like that. So we try to hover around as fully staffed as possible.
Well, it's good that that's really close. So that's very encourageable, because that helps with all of these goals that we're trying to accomplish with the high visibility and all that. You need
For sure.
people to do that. So that's encourageable. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Brenda Judd.
I was wondering if there are things that the town does or can do, kind of beyond pay, where we might not be compatible or comparable with some of the other areas, to help with housing or other benefits in town that would encourage good officers to stay or come here.
Sure. So one thing we will be talking about in other groups as well is just general workforce attraction and retention. But maybe Commander Gracie, if you have a just quick kind of punch list of things that could also help with recruiting officers that are outside of pay, if you know of anything.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's sort of the limit. You can look around the state, the country, and see different things that unique jurisdictions have to do. You know, we do not have a residency requirement, right? Chicago does. We're not Chicago, right? I know in the state, I think it's Prescott, have pretty high cost of living up there. So to keep people close, because that's a more rural area, they do have housing incentives, right? But that's something that's definitely got to be done, looked at a higher governmental level, a council type level, that sort of thing. And we'd really have to dive in and do a study to see, what are the recruitment metrics we're missing? If it's not pay, is it something else? Closely associated to pay is benefits, right? There's a host of different types, forms of benefits in law enforcement in Tucson. And as people age past the, being in their young 20s and thinking cop work is cool, and they start, raising families, they start looking at things like benefits too. That could definitely be something that we look at as proactively as we do pay, to see if we're in the ballpark on that one. Those are just some ideas. Really, we'd have to do some research and get into what people are missing or what is unattractive to people, and then see what options are available.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And like I said, some of that we definitely, I think, will kind of come up in some of the other groups too. But if anybody else has thoughts on other ways to support our police force outside of pay that you want to see in the 10-year plan, please go ahead and speak up now. If you want us to, or even any of our first responders. Well, we'll keep that on here, and definitely we can, oops, sorry about that. Look back at that in the future. So any other thoughts on the courts, school safety, business and outreach partnerships, especially for school safety? Maris, if you have any ideas as a student, if you want to put them in the chat, or if you think that these actions will help increase safety at schools, please let us know, or if you want to unmute yourself. Not seeing any other comments. Again, does everyone agree that these first drafts are headed in the right direction? Oh, Maris, sorry. Go ahead.
As a student, I do believe that these are adequate for ensuring safety at school.
Great, thank you. All right, any other comments? Are we good to move to the next page? Yep. Okay. All right, so this page, and I will make it a little bit bigger, my apologies, focuses on community outreach and programs, and there were just some other comments. So with community outreach, it was largely looking at continuing communication through newsletters, helping to educate residents on what the issues are, but also ways to help reduce crime, and that's through partnerships, and making sure that we keep certain programs, but also possibility of introducing new programs based on need. So graffiti was brought up, as well as AI, for instance, getting more popular in the future. And then on the other, there was a couple comments that in certain areas, like Vistoso Preserve, I believe was the example given, you don't have cell phone coverage to be able to call if there was an emergency. And then also concern about some more of those future issues that may arise, like fentanyl. So I'll give everyone a moment to read through these. And if you have any comments or questions on how they could be clarified, or any ads, please go ahead and raise your hand. Mike.
Yeah, I guess the question on the academy,
Mhm.
which is a great thing. The question is, do we need to do more to kind of promote that and raise awareness of it? Because, when I went through the academy, and a lot of people said to me, "Oh, what is that?" And they didn't really know what it was as much. So maybe in addition to continue educating people, maybe we need to educate people about what it is and why they should do it.
Okay, so maybe it's promote and educate residents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Oops. Any other questions or comments on this one? It looks like most people have read through it, so is everybody in agreement that these also are on a good first, headed in the right direction, and we're ready to move to the next one? Okay. All right, so our next group is the traffic safety. We spent most of the conversation talking about traffic enforcement with regards to making sure there's visibility of police on the road, but also that speeding, red light runners, more aggressive drivers is what you guys are experiencing. Then we spent a little time talking about specific roadway and routes, specifically Oracle Road and Rancho Vistoso. And then we finish off the conversation about talking about school zones, pedestrian and cyclist safety. So looking at, there's again 2 pages. We'll start off with the first page that's focused on the traffic enforcement and school zones. And then we will go to the next page to talk about routes and intersections as well as pedestrian and cyclist safety. So I'm gonna just get us back up. So again, when it came to traffic enforcement, it was about having enough police enforcement on the road and then focusing on those specific types of violations that you all are witnessing. When it came to school zones, it seemed like largely the comments were focused on the schools, the charter schools. Most of our school district schools do have school zones, but those like Basis and Lehman, they do not. And then there was making sure that speed limits are enforced during schools. There was a question, or no, I apologize. There was also another group who's talking about traffic and transportation. They also did mention that traffic congestion near those schools is concerning, as a problem as well. So again, give you a moment to read through these. Joanne.
We may already do this, but is there like a time lag between when the light turns red from when the cross intersection light turns green? Like to have a time lag, because we can talk all day about red light runners and trying to stop them, but I've noticed that there are some intersections where the green light takes a while to turn green. And to me, that seems a little more safer than immediately turning green right after the other one turned red. You understand what I'm saying on that?
Yes.
So I don't know what the time lag is.
Know if Sergeant Morris has the information for that. That might be
Yeah,
your public
our
work.
our lights and the ADOT lights as well. There's usually at least a 2-second delay between when it goes red one way and when it goes green the other way. And usually, if you are going the speed limit with the width of the intersections, you can usually get through the intersection before it turns green the other direction. Is what it's designed for. Although people kind of know that, which is kind of why they tend to try to run the red because they figure they're going to be safe there. And we do try to address these issues as much as possible. As I was just telling my commander, in just a couple hours today, I wrote 6 red light tickets in between La Reserve and Pushview and Oracle this afternoon. So, I mean, they're out there. We are catching them, and we're just doing our best to kind of get everybody to slow down a little bit. It's kind of that old running joke from that old movie Starman. Yellow does not mean go very fast. It means slow down before red. But we are working on it. There is a lag. It is designed that way. It's engineered that way so that there is a bit of a delay so that we don't have someone that just barely missed it and someone that kind of jumped the gun a little bit and have a big T-bone intersection or collision.
Okay.
Thank you. Maureen and then Mike.
Okay, I noticed that there's an inconsistency at intersections in terms of the turning arrow for left-hand turns. Some are lead and some are lag. Is it designed that way? Is it because Oracle's a state road and other roads are not? Or it just seems very confusing. As you're coming up to an intersection, And especially, I think of the ones on Tangerine where it will turn red and then there's a hesitation and then you get the green turning arrow. So that just also why it doesn't just go from green, to red for the through lanes and immediately the green arrow on the left lane. That I just don't understand, but it would just be helpful if it were consistent. Let it all be lead or all be lag, but it would make it easier to just know how to react at certain intersections.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, there's engineering things that they look at the way that traffic flows on the roads to they try to program the lights to be the most efficient that they can be. And that's what the engineers do. Oracle is a little bit different because it is all ADOT lights. They're not Town of Oro Valley lights. The rest of the lights in the town are ours, and we have a little bit more control over them with the town engineer and his department in public works and stuff. So some of them, when it turns red and there's a delay before it goes to the green arrow, that's because again, it's that delay before people turn in front of someone that might have run the red light. We kind of want to give you a chance to wait, let them go, if they did run it so that we don't have the collision. And as far as some of them are leading and some are not, I don't know I kind of prefer leading, my personal opinion, but engineers have reasons and they have studies that they've done that show that, hey, this is the most efficient way for this intersection for us to do the traffic flow and manage the traffic flow. And that's why they make those decisions and program them that way. So it kind of depends on each individual intersection and what they look at it. And that's why they're kind of a little bit different. I know for consistency, it would be nice if they were all the exact same. But they're looking at traffic flow and how it moves and how it backs up and trying to mitigate the problems that come when traffic gets congested and stuff like that. So that's about all I can really say on that.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I recall at the last meeting watching that there was a lot of discussion about that accidents tend to happen because they're rear enders and people are not paying attention or they're distracted, so on and so forth. So this says about, kind of enforcement about distracted driving, but I think it's more than enforcement. I think it's trying to get people not to be distracted in the first place. So maybe we need to be more proactive about that because once the accident happens, it's kind of too late. So I think there has to be more focus on prevention, not just enforcement, if that helps.
Okay. And maybe for the group, so in terms of preventing distracted drivers, could that, what comes to my mind is more education, things of that nature. There's other ideas, please raise your hand. Okay. Thanks, Mike. We got that down and we can definitely add that in. Okay, are there any other questions or comments or adds for this set? Okay. Are we all in agreement to move to the next one, that these are headed in the right direction? All right, so this is our route intersection safety and then also pedestrian and cycle safety. So again, Oracle Road, that was brought up not only in this group, but it was discussed in depth as well with our transportation group, especially at specific intersections. And then when it came to pedestrian and cyclist safety, a lot of the comments on there were visibility of pedestrians and cyclists and separation from traffic came up pretty consistently. And that was not only just this group, but again, our transportation group, they had the same comments as well. And then especially in both groups came up the section on First Avenue and Rancho Vistoso. After you go through Tangerine before you hit Safeway, it's very narrow. And there was a question last time asking if that was purposeful, if there's a reason there's not a wider paved shoulder there for bikes, and there isn't. So that is definitely an area that needs to be addressed. So that's why in F2, you'll see in the last bullet point, we did specify that one. We did feel that you guys rose that up high enough between this group and the other group that it was okay to be a little bit more specific for that bullet point. But again, I'll give you all a moment to read through this and let me know if you have questions, comments, or adds. Starting to look like most, oh, Maureen?
Under F2, the increased safety and awareness, the second bullet point about delineating protected bike lanes for cyclists through pavement color, physical barriers, and other design changes. I'd like to see it say or other design changes, specifically the physical barriers. If you're talking about a bike lane, that's really a problem because if you're in a bike lane that suddenly has some obstruction and you have a physical barrier on both sides, that's just an accident waiting to happen. So having the ability to move out of the bike lane is important. When they've put the rumble strips in some states, fortunately not here, where they don't have brakes in the rumble strips, it does the same thing. It locks you in, and it's very hard to go through and clear those bike lanes. So whoever's doing traffic sweeping, they can't get the obstructions out of the bike lanes if you get branches falling in or whatever happens. So I would rather see that as an or. So it might be pavement color or physical barriers or other design changes, but and implies everything's going to happen.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Okay. Okay, yep, we can make that change. Everybody agree with that? Should be or? Yep, okay. Other comments, questions? Rosa.
What's a protected crosswalk?
So that is making sure the timing of the crosswalk, I believe, let me see who made that comment.
Implementing a protected crosswalk where needed.
Yeah, so that comment stemmed from when sometimes people are experiencing where they're still in the crosswalk and people start turning. So it's not allowing, for instance, if you're in the crosswalk and there's a median in the middle, sometimes those on the other side will keep turning and it's not allowing that. So you can get all the way through without worrying about cars turning as you get stuck in the middle. But I will add that comment to see if we could use language that's clearer for everyone.
I don't think we have enough delineated crosswalks in Oro Valley, truthfully. I mean, for all the people that walk around here, especially when you get to intersections like, where people are going to the stores and shopping centers and things like that. That, enhancing them or making them more visible is probably something that we should look into.
Okay. And Rosa, do you have another comment or question? Sorry, your hand's raised still, so I wasn't sure. Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Any other comments, questions, or thoughts on the routes and intersections for pedestrian, cyclists, and safety? Are we good to move to the next one? These are, yep, okay. All right, so the last part of our conversation last time was about emergency preparedness. We talked about fires and flooding, a lot of what the concerns are. I know Golden Ranch Fire District provided a lot of great information. So then we also talked about how to make sure that information can be distributed. We talked about alerting systems as well as partnerships to help share costs, but also make sure that other entities responsible for certain areas like Pima County are doing their part as well. And so on that one, again, we have two pages here, so we can start off with the comments about fires and flooding and partnerships, and then we will move into education and communication. So starting on this one, I'll give everyone a couple minutes to read through these. And just to summarize, when we talked about fire and flooding last time, there was concern about the vegetation creating fuel for fires. So we tried to address that through H2. Also about not only people who are vulnerable, but if there's vulnerable areas. So trying to address that through both H1 and H3, similar with the alert systems. And the comment there is that there's code red, but if there's other ways, especially in the next 10 years, to better alert residents. And when it came to partnerships, it's, we're making sure that working together in town through different town departments to make sure when new developments come in, that we're making sure that the flooding and fire prevention is in place before they're even built. And then also, again, working with the county or other agencies to share resources. Okay, it looks like most people have seemingly finished up reading. Any comments, questions, or additions to this one? Rosa.
So, evacuation routes, developing and maintaining comprehensive preparedness plans for all types of hazards, which includes evacuation routes. Do we have evacuation routes in this area? Where I come from in the Northeast, we have roads that are meant to be evacuation roads, and so you'll see them marked, and they're marked all the time. But I don't notice that around here. Like if there was, a way, if there was a reason to evacuate Oro Valley, how would people know how to which way to go, how to get out, what roads not to go on, that kind of thing.
Does somebody from Golder Ranch Fire have any more information or LVPD about evacuation routes, if we currently have them, or how people would know?
This is Jennifer with Golder Ranch. I'm not aware of any specific roads that are designated as evacuation routes all the time, like you were referring to where you were before. I'm not aware of that being something we do here. So I don't know if that's something that the town can look into, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, because if we're going to do evacuation routes, we have to, like, how do you know where the evacuation route is? I mean, back east, we always know, which roads you have to go on and which ones you don't go on. And because you see the signs all the time, if you're trying to get out, you know which route to go on. So that's, I guess, my point. If we're going to ever need that, I mean, we've thankfully never needed them. And because the other thing is, there was only one time I dealt with flooding here, and it was about 7 years ago. We had 4 straight days of rain, and I was down by Costco, and I was trying to get back up to Oro Valley, and I swear to God, it took me an hour to get home. Every time I went east-west, I kept encountering roads where the water was going over the road, like literally like heaped up and over the road. And it was hair raising. And actually, when I got home, my engine was smoking. That's how wet it was, you know, from all the different, like I wouldn't go across those roads. But that is the only one time, and I've lived here 18 years. And they were the like smaller roads, but I was trying to get, you know, every time I encountered like an obstacle, I tried to find another way around it. So that was like something. There are some roads you probably should be better marked for not entering when flooded, way ahead of when you would enter it, if you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
not right where the area is that, you know, is flooded. So, but then for like evacuation routes, when they had the Bighorn fire, like they were talking about evacuating people. And I thought, well, okay, Oracle Road, right? Because that's like a state road, right? So anyway, I was just curious as to how you would identify an evacuation route.
Sure. And I don't know, Eric, did you want to add some more information?
Yeah, I don't know that I have more information. I think that's a good observation, but to some of it, particularly for us, it depends on what type of hazard we're facing at the moment. You know, the floods, obviously, we know there are certain areas to avoid, right? Overton Road and some of those spots. But as far as wildfire safety and evacuation routes for that, it's hard to really predict ahead of time what is going to be the best evacuation route. Matter of fact, the majority of the time for the things that we experience in the denser populated areas, so a lot of Oro Valley proper, is things from the fire perspective where we would actually protect you in place a lot of times. But if there is an evacuation, that's where we're partnering with OVPD. We're partnering with outside of town of Oro Valley with PCSO and Pinal County sheriffs to help us evacuate in the most appropriate way. So definitely noted. I appreciate that observation.
And I can give a little bit more context of why the term evacuation routes is in there. When we get to the legal requirements, you'll see that within the language from the state, it says you must have policies that address, and it lists everything out, and one of it is evacuation routes. So that's also kind of where it stems. But to all of your point, it may just focus on like the areas that we know flood. I know Tucson has to do that in their downtown of the do not enter when it fills up, because people still do. And then Brenda, I think you had your hand raised.
Sorry. Yeah, regarding H2, I was curious about additional education, even regarding like what possibilities are there for using swimming pools, or you know, for those who have sprinkler systems like inside houses. I know I have one. I really have no way, really no knowledge of how would we test it or know that it's going to work? Is there water pressure? You know, any kind of education around any of those additional preparation capabilities.
Okay. And maybe before we get to that, because I do want to get to
Sure.
the education ones, because I think it might fit in there to
Okay.
make sure
Yeah.
those are expanded. But are there other comments on what's shown on the screen? It looks like Maureen, your hand's up.
Yes, I have a comment or question about H1, implement risk assessments. I know in other communities, when that process is underway, it's incredibly controversial, because if you're suddenly identified as being in a risky location, whether it's fire or flood, there's a chance your insurance will be canceled or your insurance rates will go up. So people fight to say, oh, no, my property is okay. So has there been an effort to do that? And if not, how would a town go about trying to do it without, getting into endless debate and roadblocks?
Eric or Jen, do you know if there have been any risk assessments for specific areas?
Yeah, I mean, there have been, we just did one at request of the town for the, what is it, Vistoso Trails Nature Preserve. But we haven't done a lot of large scale ones. Typically they're handled, I mean, for our risk, mainly we're talking wildfire, and those mitigation plans are handled at the county or the state level. We do run into the problem, as Hal had mentioned earlier, with hearing things about homeowners insurance being canceled or whatnot, because insurance is looking at different rating schedules that are proprietary to them that we don't utilize. So it's definitely a potential issue. We do have a community risk assessment on our website where we have outlined exactly how we deal with our EMS risk, our fire risk, our special rescue, so that would include flooding type of risk and things of that nature. So there are some risk assessments out there, but I don't know that it's something that we heavily advertise.
Okay. So are there other thoughts about H1? Maybe we need to, do you think it's necessary to keep it in? Or do you think I mean, it sounds like we are doing them a little bit. What does the group think in terms of how it could create problems for for insurance and things, as Hal and Maureen brought up? Any additional comments? Rosa?
I would keep it in because that's the climate we're in now. I mean, the reason they did the Vistosa one is because people who live on the old Vistosa golf course asked for it, And actually, it's really interesting. There was a social media post on it, and so many people responded by saying, well, don't just do it there. I have an area near my house that I'm worried about. I mean, so many people. So it is on people's minds. Like if they live near like a piece of desert that has lots of vegetation, like non-native vegetation in it. So there were quite a few responses from people. So I would leave it in. I know it's on people's minds, and if there's another fire, it'll be on people's minds again. You know what I mean? So I would leave it in.
Any other thoughts? And maybe we could even look at the wording,
Yeah.
To make it still get to the intent, but maybe not make it seem
Ominous.
ominous and so rigid and formal. I don't know if
Not
that
make
will
it
help.
not make it seem inevitable,
Yeah. Hal?
Yeah. I think it should be left in, but you might want to sort of pair it with I2.
Okay.
Say something about working with our local government partners to implement, because it's not going to involve just the town. It's going to have to involve other agencies, state, Golden Ranch. It's not just the town that's going to have to do that.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so is everybody agreed that we'll leave it in, but we can look at the language to help at least see if there's a ways to improve it to not also create further consequences for homeowners. Okay. Any additional comments on this page? Or are we good to move ahead? Okay. All right, so this one comes to education and outreach. So Brenda, definitely want to make sure, let's see, that we're including it under education and outreach about being able to be prepared for fire safety, whether that's using sprinklers or flooding or swimming pools. And would love to hear your thoughts on maybe how we can. We are pretty broad in J1, so maybe there's a way we can add some language to make sure there's more of those things are included.
Yeah, I think I saw on Shark Tank one time that there's some device that people can get to access their pools for fire prevention or fire, like if you had a fire. But beyond that, I've never seen or heard of any, we have pools, big source of water. If there was a fire, how could that be accessible or used? How could we use it in those cases? Or is it just best not to, that we just leave it for the fire department to access our pools as needed? For people who have like the interior sprinkler systems and stuff, are there best practices for knowing that they'll work? Is there something that could be included in the education so people know if they have those, what to do with them, if anything?
Okay, and then, okay, so I got your comment down. Yeah, we can look
Yeah,
at
thanks.
adding that somehow in either one of, with J1 or even a different action.
Sure.
And then Jen, you, I think, wanted to share some information.
Yeah, just to comment to Brenda, I can give you a phone number right now to our fire prevention main office. You could always give us a call and we can walk you through how you can test the sprinkler system at your house. It's very simple. It's just one inspector test valve you have. So I can put that phone number in the chat for you.
Sure. Love it. Thank you.
And then a quick comment regarding the pools. I just want to let everyone know, so in our fire district, we have about 11 water purveyors. So we have redundancy if something was going to happen with one water purveyor system, but specific to the town of Oro Valley, they have a water system that has several different zones. I can't speak to how many zones they have, but they probably have dozens of zones. So if one goes down, they can get water from another zone. And then we also have water tenders in our fire district. Those tenders hold anywhere from 2,500 to maybe 3,000 gallons of water. So if we were in an area with no hydrants or an issue with the water supply, we'll bring a water tender, drop a 3,000 gallon tank, put our water tender water in the tank, and then we'll do a tender shuttle to the next closest hydrant where the water is available. So we have a lot of redundancy if there was a situation where there was an issue with the water system. Because of that, it's pretty much unlikely we would ever draft water from a swimming pool or a static water source throughout the town of Oro Valley.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other comments, questions, or additions? Oh, Joanne?
Okay, so when we talk about like increasing education about the emergency preparedness and all, like in J1, update programs, a lot of these, and then even J2, a lot of these are based on like websites or electronic. Do we do anything for those? Because we have an older population in Oro Valley that don't necessarily are not on their phones all the time, don't go on their computers all the time. So is there something we back up for those people?
Okay, nope, that's a good point. Need for Yep, and that's where definitely, I mean, we could look into that of adding, programs or something like that, to your point, where they can physically come and learn. Eric, I think you may have something to share too.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, again, just from the fire service perspective, we have our community risk reduction division that does actively go out and meet with homeowners associations, meet with schools, meet with, other community groups, and does a variety of safety programming related to risks that are experienced. So speaking to seniors, our district has about 34% our demographic over 65. So we do have specific programming that we go out and target to that demographic.
Great, thank you. So maybe we can elaborate on J3 as well to get that in there, to make sure there's also the kind of physical community outreach, not just online. Great. Okay, any other questions, comments, or ads? And again, please feel free to use the chat if that's what you're more comfortable with. Hal.
Yeah, I know Oro Valley Police have their neighborhood watch program. My neighborhood is part of that. And it seems to me that would be a way of bringing in information about this topic as well. So I'm not sure if there's coordination going on between Golden Ranch and Oro Valley Police Department, but it seems to be an opportunity to share information on different topics relating to police protection and emergency response.
Thank you, Hal. That on there. Okay, so it looks like we will make some additions to this one to talk about the different practices or what or technology out there to help people be more prepared for emergencies, and then an ad to make sure that it's not just online education or online information, but also there's other opportunities and programs for people to learn about, even maybe coordinating and distributing information through neighborhood watch programs. But other than that, is this one at least headed in the right direction? Everybody agree? Okay. So the last page are our legal requirements. So what's on the left-hand column? That is the language from the state law regarding 10-year plans and what has to be included. Again, here you can see that evacuation routes is in the second paragraph. That's why we included it in that other one. So this is how staff sees the actions, policies, and goals that we just talked about fit into the legal requirements. I will say, especially for the second legal requirement, when it comes to road function and water supply, we will address those in the future with the other groups. So these also will continue to be refined and evolve to make sure we're meeting all the standards the state requires. But if there's any questions, comments, or additions to these, please raise your hand. And D2 is also a duplicate. I apologize, it doesn't say that. Are there any questions, comments? These ones? Okay. And so that gets us through it all. Great job, everyone. All your work from last time, and I appreciate your time to review all of these and go through them. We will continue to work on them and get them back out to you folks. I do want to mention, you may have seen this slide when you were entering the meeting tonight. There is a new effort to help with future trails and paths, plan those. It's called OV Trails Connect. Now it is separate from OV's Path Forward, but both OV's Path Forward and OV's Trails Connect will want to make sure they're complement each other. But this effort is really a focused effort on trails, unpaved trails and paved paths. So for those of you especially interested in pedestrian and cyclists and connectivity, You may want to get involved here as well. There's a survey right now available on ovtrailsconnect.com that you can take until March 17th. You can also join a trail stakeholder group, which will have meetings very similar to what we're doing here. Their first meeting is March 12th. They will have another meeting in April and probably one in June and maybe in the fall. So they meet a little bit less than the resident working groups, but you can sign up and get more information on that site if you're interested. And with that, I do want to thank everyone. So your next meetings are going to be focused on community character. What that means is our demographics, so being family friendly, but also making sure we're meeting the needs of all ages in the community. Also looks at, how to make sure the community, some of the things that people valued of Oro Valley is that it's quiet, it's peaceful. So making sure we maintain those values, and then also discussing arts and culture. Similar to how the safety meetings went, your first meeting will be our whiteboard exercise. We'll have the discussion questions posted online. We'll ask you all to please respond to those. We'll use those to have a really great conversation in that first meeting where we'll walk through to get additional guidance from everyone. And then the second meeting on March 27th will be like this meeting where we'll walk through the results of that first meeting, the goals, policies, and actions. Then in April, we'll talk about parks, recreation, and we will also touch on trails as well, even though there's the other effort going on. And so with that, I do want to make sure, though, if there's anybody else who has comments or questions about safety, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat before we go. Mike?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. When I think about safety, a lot of the safety comments are about, emergency response, but I'm wondering if we've ever touched on, having kind of safety practices on site. So for example, defibrillators, is that something that is kind of in scope here? I think about, like, I play tennis at the community center or at Push Ridge, and there's an older population, as we've talked about, and something like that could be very handy and potentially save a life, and making sure that things like that are as accessible as possible. And again, I don't know where that goes, but just wanted to kind of throw that out there and see if that's something that's in scope for what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely is. So I am writing that down now, and we'll see where we can fit it in. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Other comments, questions related to public safety? Okay, well, not seeing any. Again, I want to thank you all, and I'll give you 30 minutes of your evening back. So thank you for joining us tonight. And again, the next meeting will be in March, so I'll send an email out beforehand.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.